Hey everybody, this is Tracy here to recap season 7, episode 2 of Sweetie Pies, which was entitled The Ripple Effect. And it was a slow, uneventful show. So this review or recap, shall I say, is going to be awfully quick. So the show opens up and Tim and Charles have returned to St. Louis, as promised from the last episode. Remember when it ended last week, they were talking about maybe it would be a good idea for them to return home. So they have, and Tim, he's planned a grand opening at one of the new Sweetie Pie locations in St. Louis. And I think this was the one they said is near the airport. And so he's invited all the family to come to the grand opening, but it looks like Miss Robbie and her sister Linda, no, it wasn't Linda, I think it was the other sister, they had no idea about the grand opening. So when we go over to that location and they're having the party and all the friends and family are there to celebrate, Charles comes in and he surprises Monique. They didn't know that he was in town. And then I think they said it was, I can't remember if it was Tim's, I can't remember whose grandfather it was. Was it Tim's grandfather or Monique's grandfather? Not sure, but anyway, somebody's grandfather was a preacher, and so he blessed the restaurant, and they're all, a lot of camaraderie, and looks like all the businesses are doing good. And so Tim, he goes back and he's talking with his friend Johnny. Remember, Johnny was introduced in the last episode, and him and Tim met while they were in prison together. And so he's asking Johnny how things are going, and Johnny lets him know that everything is going good and that cousin Michelle is doing, pulling her load as well. And so Tim calls cousin Michelle outside and he's giving her kudos and telling her, she's doing a really great job. And so she breaks down crying because she says that that is the first time that Tim has ever complimented her or told her that she was doing a good job. So in the midst of her emotional moment with Tim, she gets to thinking, this might be a good time for me to request that raise that I so desperately need. So, when she brings up a raise to Tim, he gets real quiet. So she didn't get an answer, yes or no, whether or not she's going to be making extra money. But cousin Michelle said them hairdos she have, they don't come cheap, and she could use a raise so she can go get her hair redone. So then we have Monique and her mom. Remember, her mom is Linda, who's Robbie's sister. I think it's how good. Yeah, the sister. And so they're having lunch together, and they're getting caught up. And so of course the conversation goes to Andre, and we learned that Andre was killed. He was in a recording studio, which I'm not sure, probably was like in the basement of somebody's house or something, but he was recording and he had just finished up and he went outside and was talking on his cell phone when someone either drove by or came up and shot him. And then Monique also mentions, that she's really heartbroken because Andre had been back in town for a couple of weeks, but she hadn't seen him since he had been back. And she said that they talked on the phone often, but this time when he came home, they didn't talk, and she was so busy with work that they didn't get to meet up or connect with each other. So I know that has to be really painful for her. And then we learned that Miss Linda had a son, who's Monique's brother, named Aaron, and Aaron was killed. He was one of his friends had gotten into a fight with somebody, and he was just standing there, I guess, watching the fight or whatever, and someone came up and shot and killed him, and he was 19 years old. And I'm just thinking, grateful that I don't live in a city that has a lot of crime violence, but it's just amazing that their one family has endured so much because, Miss Robbie's son, who was Andre's father, he was killed by gun violence. Andre killed, the cousin was killed, and that just seems like a lot for one family to have to endure. And so Monica, she's talking to her mom and she's saying like, her strength, she takes so much pride in how strong her mother was getting through that ordeal, and even now, dealing with Andre's death. And so Miss Linda goes on to explain, that she was angry and she was hurt, but it was killing her on the inside. And in order for her to live, she had to forgive the guy that killed her son, in order to be able to move on. Otherwise, he was going to take her out too. And I just think that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of strength and everything to go through something like that. And then you just have to know that your child is dead, but this child is still alive. And like she pointed out, yes, he's incarcerated, but he still gets to have visits from his family. He still gets to talk on the phone and pretty much, get up every day and live a life. It's a life in captivity, but the way these prisons are operated these days, I know people that have Facebook pages and they are in jail. And to me, that just doesn't seem fair. But it's the way of the world, right? So then we have Miss Robbie and Tim, and they're hanging out. So he's telling her that he wants her to come to California, but Miss Robbie says that she has her own things going on, as she's getting ready to open up a hamburger joint that's going to be called Hamburger Heaven. And so she takes Tim to the location where the restaurant is going to be opened up, and it's like in a I think she said it was a really good location because it was near the metro line, and it's in a strip mall, with several other businesses. But she thinks it's a steal, and she said she's gonna make it into $1 million business. And so Tim is kind of complaining and has things to say, but Ms. Robbie's like, how can you be complaining about me opening up another business in my name when you're out in California and even here just opening up businesses, without my permission, but she lets him know that that needs to stop, and she's not going to, keep allowing him to do that to her. So when Tim leaves his mom, he's at the park with TJ, and TJ is getting so big. Well, not big, but he's definitely growing up. He's going to be a tall one. And so, Tim is talking about how he doesn't get to spend that much time with him, but of course, when he's home, he wants to spend as much time as he can. And that, no matter what he has planned to do with TJ has his own plans, which is usually, take me to the park and let's get on the sliding boards and all that, but he's just a little kid. And if that's what makes him happy, Tim, go along with it. So then we have Janae, and she's going to visit Miss Robbie. So Janae has met her a new man, and she's engaged to be married. And I don't know if Janae was just having a bad day, but she seen, even with the flashbacks of when she, met the guy and was introducing him to Tim's family, she just doesn't look as well kept and put together as she did in the previous episode, the earlier episodes when she was with Tim. So hopefully, when she came to visit Miss Robbie, she was just, bouncing around the house and just decided to get up and go see her. But good for Janae. I'm glad she's happy, and I'm glad she found someone, who makes her happy and who wants to make her his wife. So later on, Tim goes back to visit his mom, and so he shares with her, he's joking with her about the women in LA, they have all these implants and going on, and it scares him because I guess he's used to, all natural women. And so Miss Robbie shares with him that she has some implants too. And so she's talking about twerking, and Tim is like, Mama, I really don't want to hear this. And so she breaks down and tells him that, her teeth are implants, she has fake teeth. So they decide to go to the old neighborhood to check on the house that Miss Robbie grew up in, so her mom's house. And so, as they're driving over, they're pointing out different landmarks that hold sentimental value to them. And, they're talking about like Tim, where he used to go skating at, and Miss Robbie was talking about, where she went to high school at. So when they get to the house, they get out and they're talking, and then they mention that where Andre was killed at wasn't too far from the house, and we learned that they have not been to the location where Andre was murdered at, since he died. And so they decided that, now might be a good time to just go ahead and face that demon. And so we see them as they're driving over, and they go to the location. And one other thing, while they were talking, Tim, he mentions that they lived in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in St. Louis. And, he's pretty much just talking about, growing up. I guess he knew there was dangers, but he didn't realize just how dangerous it was. And it wasn't until he went to prison, that he really realized how bad things were. And he was... I think he said he went to jail when he was 17 years old. And I was thinking, dang, and I think he was there for 10 years. So yeah, really rough situation. So on a lighter note, we're gonna go over to California, check in with what's going on with them. And so, of course, Chef Clark has been left in charge. She's trying to lay down the law, but nobody's paying any attention to her. And so her and Bruce, they get into it, and Bruce feels like her methods of managing is very demeaning and demoralizing, and he doesn't like the way that she's talking to him. And so they're going back and forth, and it's just very unprofessional. And I think part of the problem may be that Tim is friends with these people. So like Bruce and Tim, they go back and, back to the St. Louis days. And so because Tim and the rest of the family are so lax in their management style, I think that now that they're moving into other territory and bringing in new people, that those people have a business sense about them. So they have a different sense about them, and so it's definitely a culture shock for the people that came from St. Louis with Tim and Charles to have to deal with people who are already in California, who've worked in the restaurant business and have a different ethic about them. And so, Chef Clark, she drops down to Bruce's level, and she's telling him, to shut up. And then he's telling her, don't talk to me like I'm a child, I'm a grown man. And then at one point, I think he slammed the door in her face and locked it. He didn't want to talk to her anymore about it. And so after that, we have Chef Clark, her and Chloe are getting into it. And so she's trying to explain to Chloe that it's supposed to be first ticket in, first ticket out, and that you don't, move the tickets around because this item is easier to fix than that item. So we're going to put this item to the side and do it last. And so, just very I understood where she was coming from, and Chloe was just being very disrespectful. They were cursing at Chef Clark, and I'm just like, how do these people operate like this? And they're just doing all this back and forth and yelling, and what difference does it make as long as the people get served? And Chef Clark is like, yeah, but we're losing money because if people have to wait too long, then they cancel their orders or they want their money back, and that's not working. And she starts talking about the industry standards. So it's really a St. Louis versus California thing going on. And at the end of the day, it's going to hurt the business if they don't pull it together. And so Charles comes back from St. Louis, and then Bruce is filling him in on what's happened with Chef Clark. And so they decide that they're going to have a sick out. So Charles, Chloe, and Bruce are going to call out like on one of the busiest days at the restaurant, and then see if Chef Clark can handle it without them, which I think is a really stupid game to be playing. Number one, Charles, you're family, so you should want what's best for the restaurant. And then Chloe, your butt just got back in town and got your job back, so how dare you be trying to plan a sick out with anybody, but that's their mentality, and that's what they want to do. And so on the day of the sick out, they don't even call in. She ended up calling Charles and asked Charles, well, where are you? And Charles is like, oh, I won't be in today because I'm sick. And so she said, okay, well, the next time you're sick, can you call in and let us know? And then he had like some flip remark to give to her. And so then later on, we see him and Chloe, and they're out, walking together and talking and sitting down. And I think part of the problem with Chloe and Charles being friends is that they're both codependent on each other. And so there was a moment where they sat down and they talked, and they basically realized that, they're at the age that they are, and they haven't really gotten anywhere in life. Even though they moved from St. Louis to California, they're still just as broke as they were in St. Louis, and their lives aren't progressing. And so I guess in a good sense, it gave them a moment to reflect and realize that they both need to be doing better in life. And so the show ends with Tim and Miss Robbie, they decided to go over to the spot where Andre was killed at. And so they were walking up, they get out of the car and they're walking up the street, and she points out a store that she says should have had video recording of the murder, but I guess the store, hasn't come forward with the images. And then they point out, Charles points across the, not Charles, and then Andre points across the street to show that they can see Miss Robbie's mother's house from, where they are. And so the show ends with them, trying to decide if they want to go across the street to the actual point where Andre was murdered or not, and that's how it ended. So, I hope next week's episode will be a little more eventful. But I think the taping of the show may have been too soon after Andre's death, or maybe they're just using this as an opportunity to, spotlight the fact that, all this crime and killing each other, it isn't solving any problems. And you put a human side to the grief that the families experience, at the loss of a loved one, especially when it's just a stupid, senseless murder. So, do you think that they should be using Andre's death on the show as a mechanism to highlight the violence in St. Louis? Let's get the conversation started. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll be reviewing the season finales of Issa Rae's Insecure and Queen Sugar coming up in the next week. And then you can also check out my reviews of Married to Medicine and Housewives of Atlanta. So I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.